this. Okay, so you're going to follow along and we'll work through this. There are 5 paragraphs. We'll deal with each paragraph at a time. Paragraph 1, what we're looking for is we're going to turn paragraph 1 into a single sentence summary and then a one-word sentence. Paragraph 1, the current conflict in Sudan is only the latest chapter in the country's violent history. Apart from an 11-year peace from 1972 to 1983, Sudan has been entrenched in war since it became an independent nation in 1956. Darfurian conflict erupted just as a long civil war between northern and southern Sudan was winding down. That war was fought between mainly Muslim Arab North and mostly non-Muslim, non-Arab South. It began in 1983 and was one of the longest lasting and deadliest wars of the 20th century. About 2 million civilians were killed and more than 4 million people were forced to flee their homes. So before I think of a sentence to summarize everything, I can think about some words that are repeated. I mean, I have war, and then I have more, another war. I have wars. So this is one of those paragraphs right away that I'm thinking, okay, I know the one-word summary for it. Okay, so my one-word summary here will be war. Now I need to come up with a sentence. Okay, now one of the things you can do is you could open up another tab to have the article, or you could scroll. I have the article here too, so I can look at it as well. My one-sentence summary, I'm going to start off by restating the question. When you do tables and charts, you don't always have to write sentences, but here it's asking you for a sentence. So for paragraph 1, I would say paragraph 1 stated that Sudan has been involved in war for a very long time. For much of its history. And I always want to spell check. Sometimes my fingers get ahead of themselves. Paragraph 1 stated that Sudan has been involved in war for much of its history. So that's my summary of paragraph 1. One-word summary is war. You can pause this video right now and then go to your assignment and add that to it. For this lesson, you're going to be assessed by what you put down here. You don't have to put exactly what I'm putting down, but it should definitely summarize the first paragraph. Okay, I'm going to keep this right here on the chart, and I'm going to read from my article. Some of the refugees are known as the Lost Boys of Sudan, fleeing violence and the fear of being forced into war. Thousands of boys fled foot to Ethiopia. The 1,000-mile trek was grueling. They went days without food or water, eating leaves and berries and sucking liquid from mud to stay alive. Exhausted, some boys died of starvation and dehydration. I might put flee as my word. I would write for my sentence possibly. You notice I'm restating every single time. Paragraph 2 stated that the Lost Boys were forced to flee and were forced to flee their homes, and they faced horrible conditions. Again, that summarizes, it's the gist of paragraph 2, you may have come up with something different, and that's fine, as long as, I can look at your sentence and say, oh yeah, that's the summary for the paragraph. The boys who continue found shelter at a refugee camp in Ethiopia, but their safety was short-lived. Fighting erupted in Ethiopia in 1991, forcing them to flee again. As they ran, gunmen and tanks fired at them. To escape, the boys had to cross the crocodile-infested river. Thousands drowned, were eaten by crocodiles, or were shot. And John Dow talked about this. And I mean, just reading it on paper, it's not real, but when he was speaking it, was like, oh my, that's crazy. That man right in front of us had to, as he was 15 at the time, had to swim across a river that was infested with crocodiles, and they were shooting at him. I think the one word for this would be Ethiopia. Paragraph 3 stated that the Lost Boys initially found shelter in Ethiopia. It said they stayed for a little bit, so we could put, but they had to once again flee for their lives when they were kicked out. Okay, so paragraph 4. By the time the boys arrived at the refugee camp in Kenya in 1992, only 10,000, fewer than originally. The 26,000 were still alive. After 9 years at the camp, about 4,000 of the lost boys were brought to the U.S. Okay, so I would think Kenya would be our one word. And then we'd write our sentence, paragraph 4. We could jump right down here, do the same thing, paragraph. Paragraph 4 stated that the Lost Boys found a home in Kenya. And after several years, many of them came into the U.S. John Dow came to Syracuse, New York. That's where he ended up when he came from Kenya. Salva, we will find out what happens to Salva, but we know he lives a parallel life to John, so he does make it to the U.S. Where does he end up? Well, you'll have to keep reading to find that out. And then finally, the last paragraph of our last paragraph of our article. Now some Lost Boys are returning home. A peace agreement signed on January 9th, 2005 officially ended Sudan's civil war. Though aid agencies recently reported that many communities in the south still lack food and water, some 500,000 Sudanese are expected to return home this year in one of the largest movements of people in recent history. One of the things that we did not have time to talk to John about was the current state of affairs in Sudan. Sudan is still facing war within its borders, but people are helping out. John Dow helps out through his organization. You'll see how Salva helps out through his, but it's still definitely not a peaceful country. Later on, we'll be listening to some current music from Sudan, and the message is one that that peace is definitely needed. So paragraph 5 stated that peace has finally arrived in Sudan, and many lost boys are returning, even though we know that that's not necessarily the case today. But we could say maybe home could be our one word describing the lost boys going home finally. Okay, the second part of this assignment is to come up with similarities between the article and the book, and then coming up with evidence where you found that from the article, evidence from the book, and where you found it. Okay, so the example I gave in class was that both have war. Another example, both you're talking about the Lost Boys, and you're talking about the article, and you're talking about Salva. Both are refugees. Our third one that we could have would be both faced hardships and dangerous situations. Okay, so now we need to, how is this the case for the article about war? So you try to locate a good quote. The quote that I'm going to pick from paragraph 1 is the third sentence in part of the second sentence. Sudan, it's in quotation marks because I'm copying it exactly. Sudan has been entrenched. That means they've been involved in war since it became independent nation. And you want to make sure you copy quotes over exactly. Became an independent nation in 1956. That was paragraph. PARA is the abbreviation for paragraph. That was paragraph 1. Okay, with the book, I looked through chapter 1 and I will find a quote. The quote that I find in chapter 1 is on page 6. The war had started 2 years earlier. And again, it's in quotation marks. And that was on page 6. You need to find something about being a refugee, about fleeing. And I could write this quote here, which is also this is in paragraph 2. Violence and the fear of being forced into war. Thousands of boys fled by foot. That would be paragraph 2. You remember where Salva had to flee? That's also chapter 1 is page 7. Page 7. It is, then he was running 2, in quotation marks. Then he was running 2, running this is his fleeing, page 7. Okay, now we need to find something about hardships. One of the things in the story was when they had to swim across the Nile. They went days without food and water. We're only on chapter 6, so we don't have all of the different details. So we need to find a good quote for that, for his having to worry about hardships. Could be something like when he was left. Could be something when he was sick from the food. Could be when he was hungry. Okay, so you want to take a moment and look for a good quote, like I'm doing now. This is good right here. This is for Salva. It's on page 23. Salva had never been so hungry. Stumbled along. Somehow moving 1 foot ahead of the other. That was page 23. Now we just need to find a quote from the story. There's a lot of different things there. We could write, to escape, boys had to cross, this was the crocodile-infested river. Elo. And that was actually the 3rd paragraph. Okay, so now the chart's completed. You can pause the chart if you can pause the video if you'd like and complete the chart. You can use my examples, that's fine. You know, you can come up with more examples on your own. Okay, now it's time to write the paragraph. So we have our paragraph, we have our question. It says, how does Salva's story relate to the article Time Trip Sudan Civil War? Okay, so this is where we need to write the claim. Whenever you're writing an essay, okay, whenever you're writing a paragraph, you need to start with a claim. Then what you're going to do is you're going to introduce evidence. You're going to have evidence. And evidence, I mean a quote from the article or story, and then you're going to explain it. Sometimes you can do some of those steps in a single sentence or a couple of sentences. Sometimes you have separate for each. And then you're going to do that again because it asks for 2 examples. And then you're going to have a conclusion. Now, here we could have our claim. We could show that they're similar. We could say, use one quote from the article to show something and then another quote to show something else. But this is going to be our approach, if you will. It's going to be claim, introduce evidence, explain evidence, introduce evidence, explain evidence, having the evidence in between, sort of like you may have heard a quote sandwich or a quote hamburger. You have the introduction to the evidence, you have the evidence, you explain it like a sandwich. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here quickly, and then we'll be able to wrap this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and you can pause after I write a sentence and copy it yourself into your own assignment. How does Salva's story relate to the article? Salva's story relates to the article. When you're typing articles or titles of books, everything is italics. So what you would do is you would highlight it and then you would press the I, the slanted I. Solve a story relates to the article Time Trip Sudan Civil War in many ways, such as war and becoming a refugee. Okay, so that's my topic sentence. That's my claim. I'm going to make it green. It's my claim. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce a piece of evidence. Okay. I want to include both pieces of evidence, so I'm going to alter this a little bit. I'm just going to focus in on the war because that'll still give me a solid paragraph. So solve a story relates to the article Time Trip Sudan Civil War in many ways, such as war, such as being involved in war. Okay, so if I do that, now I can write my next sentence. Okay, my next sentence will be, I could start off by saying an example of this in the article is found in paragraph. Author writes, we don't know who the author is because it doesn't say in the citation. It should, it doesn't. What does the author write? The author writes, if we look back up to our evidence chart, that's where we can get our evidence from, right? We don't even have to look back to the article. We have it right here. Okay, then we can just copy and paste it in. Make sure it's the same size so we know you make it look all the same. Get rid of that. This is still part of the same evidence, so we'll make it the same color. An example of this is when the article, an example of this is in the article. Notice how I'm just constantly editing, seeing if it makes sense. An example of this is in the article in paragraph 1. The author writes, Sudan has been entrenched in war since it became an independent nation. Now, in my normal plan, I would explain the evidence, and I'm sort of going to do that when I write a transition to my next character, or my next part, which is Salva. So I can say change colors. Salva 2 experiences war just like the lost boys of the article. Salva is a lost boy. I mean, that's why the comparisons are so close. In chapter 1 on page 6, Salva thinks about, remembers, and it was, the exact quote was, the war had started 2 years earlier. Now we're going to end with our quotation marks. Author is, last name is Park, and then we can put page 6. That's proper citation for the novel. But if you just had, on page 6, that would be fine as well. But you could also include proper citation. All I need to do is wrap everything up now, and I have a solid paragraph. Salva, story, and article are closely related because Salva 2 is a lost boy. And there you have it. I have two different pieces, two details, one from the article, one from the story, one from the novel. I have a claim, I have my evidence, and I have my conclusion. Okay. I know this is a long video. I'm not going to try to make them this long, but I wanted to make sure I walked you through the entire assignment. If you need to pause this, and copy it over, you can. I'll get rid of the colors so that it's easier to see. And then you can just pause this. Remember, when you're writing a paragraph response, you have the claim, you have your evidence, and then you have your conclusion. I hope this helps. By all means, feel free to message me through Canvas if you have any further questions. If you missed class today, it would be great if you could log on Monday and join us. We're going to be doing a Nearpod Monday. We're going to be doing a Nearpod on Tuesday. Would love to have you in class. If you were in class and you're just getting some extra help, definitely want to thank you for taking that kind of effort. When you see something underlined like that, it means that there was a misspelling, but that should be right. You can pause that, and then you can use that for your response. Have a great weekend. And as always, go Bills. Even though they're not playing till Monday night, we'll throw it in there anyway for good luck. And I will see all of you next week. Thank you for watching.